Okay.
Here we go. So this is Judy and myself. And so I'll just really give you a very brief introduction of me. I have been working as a play therapist for, well, only a few years now. I'm in my infancy in play therapy, really, but I have been working in academia around play therapy probably for 10 years around play-based ways of working with adolescents mostly, because before that I worked in mental health with adolescents and realised that we probably needed different approaches to be able to work with them, and also with children that were neurodiverse as well. And I considered myself quite a playful person from the beginning. And prior to that, I have been a nurse for 20 years and, well, a little bit more than that probably now. And I guess when Judy and I came together with both having nursing backgrounds and then both being play therapists, with Judy being my lecturer in play therapy when I was a student and now going on to be colleagues, we decided that this was something that was really important. But I'll let Judy give a little rundown of her before we then dive into the next slide.
Thanks, Belinda, and thank you for the lovely warm introduction, Rike, and welcome everybody. It's lovely to hear that it's sunny in England. It's been a beautiful day here in Geelong, where I'm presenting from, and Belinda's not that far away. And I guess that I come to this presentation today because I was a child once and I knew how to play. So I'm so old, it was before TV. But I just wanted to say, teach us as playful academics, as our title says. I think that play has also been really important throughout my whole career, both nursing as paediatric nurse and then as doing a PhD in nursing in the medical environment, and then going on to do play therapy in the UK. So we might just flick over to the next slide. There we go. And we've got an acknowledgement of country here. So I'd just like to read that. And it was really lovely to see where everybody's from. We've got people here from Norway and Denmark and UK, and there's probably some other places there. I can't see anybody else in the chat box at the moment. But what we do in Australia is we do have an acknowledgement of country, or often a welcome to country. And a welcome to country is usually given by an Australian Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person from which the country or land that they come from and have a direct line with. Whereas an acknowledgement of country can be done and announced by a non-Aboriginal or somebody that comes from a different area of Australia or Torres Strait Islander populations. This is just standard practice that we do. It's a way of being able to ensure that events recognises the place of Indigenous people as the first custodians of this land. We do this in order to promote awareness of the history and culture of Indigenous populations and their connection to the land. As you're probably aware, the Australian Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander populations have one continuous culture for over 65 million years. So it's important that we acknowledge this in the place that we work and live on. The reason why we talk about country, as you can see in the top left-hand corner, is the little map of Australia. Prior to colonisation, they were the different countries. So when we're connecting to land, water, the land and country that we live on, that's where we're referring to. So I just wanted to give that sort of caveat before we do the acknowledgement of country. So as we gather today for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so recognise the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging of all the land and work that we work and live on, and their ancestral spirits, with gratitude and respect. Thanks, Belinda.
Thanks, Judy. Okay, so diving right into it, I wanted to just give you a little bit of an overview of the abstract from the paper that Rico invited us to take part in as part of this Playful Academia Beautiful World. So what Judy and I came together to develop was a paper based on playful approaches in teaching in higher education. And so I'm just going to read this for you. So in higher education, playful approaches to teaching are challenging for some academics, especially since play could be considered childish when serious nursing topics are described and explored. Nevertheless, integrating playful and andragogy may lead to improved educational outcomes by including the art and science of play therapy techniques within teaching scholarship. The use of play-based approaches in teaching are powerful because play is recognised as the change agent to facilitate communication, including both direct and indirect teaching. Play also enhances creative problem solving, social relationships, empathy, and self-esteem, which are crucial skills for nurses to develop. So innovative play-based education, employing, for example, games, puppets, and dramatic role play activities, is evidencing in the literature now. Furthermore, projective small world play in the teaching of nursing concepts has had a significant positive effect on student learning outcomes. In small world play, miniature replicas of people, animals, buildings, furnishings, and other relevant toys are utilised to simulate real life medical scenarios. This presentation that we're going to be doing today will give you some examples of play-based ways that can be integrated into education. So these are things that Judy and I have actually done both in lecturing in nursing and in play therapy as well.
Okay, so the overview for today's session, we want to really have some time and some interactive activities with you. So we'll be using what's called a Mentee Meter. So we want to be able to gauge, the playfulness of people that are in the room, both personally and professionally. So if you have another device, a smartphone, I'll be putting up a QR code. If you've got a QR reader, that'd be fun. So we can sort of engage what's going on with the people that are here today. Once we have considered our playful selves, Belinda and I will share a little bit more about the details about ourselves in relation to just our playful selves. One thing that both Belinda and I have found that in academia and in playfulness can be viewed as the opposite to work. And we've often found that sometimes play is trivialized. So we want to sort of have an understanding and conversation about that. We will then talk a little bit about our roles as teachers, as playful academics, drawing from experiences as both a play therapist as well as nurses. And we wish to explore some experiential activities to demonstrate how we link playful andragogy into the academic work of our teaching. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, it's taking me a double click to get to the next slide for some reason. So many of you have probably come here who are as academics but are also interested in playfulness or play-based academia. And so as Judy said, we're going to start the session with a reflection of your own rating of playfulness as a professional and then your own rating of playfulness in your personal lives. So this next slide here is the little QR code that you can click on. Is everyone able to do that? And then that's
maybe just give us a thumbs up if you're all right with the QR code. If you don't, just go to mentee.com and you'll put in that code 42034425. And you should come up with that.
And then what I might do soon, I'll just check that people are giving us a thumbs up. is I'll stop sharing so that you can share the Mentee.
Okay, just make sure people have got that. Yep, people are starting to come with it now, so I'll just share.
Yep, I'll stop sharing then.
You see that?
Yep.
So Ricky, how many people did you say were in around? So about 15?
Yeah, I think including us, I think you should definitely rate yourself as well, right? But otherwise,
Yeah.
I think around 15 is almost full capacity, plus minus one or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to stop share for a sec so that I can then go back here, and I'll now open up this one, and you should go through to the next one.
Yep.
Just go there for a sec. Excellent. So this is how you rate yourself as a playful and your personal life. So what we do outside, we wanted to compare the difference between our professional lives and our personal lives. Couple more coming in.
All the people that are excited about data analysis might have some things to say about these.
Okay, well, when for the final results, we'll come back to that anyway. I'll stop sharing now. There's just a couple more coming through. And okay, back to you, Belinda.
All right, great.
I'll just get you to share your screen again.
Yep. Sorry, here we go. All right. So I'll just go to the next slide again now. Sorry, I had to double click it. So this is Judy and I being serious and then being playful. And I don't know if anyone else has had the opportunity to play around with Zoom and all the fun little add-ons you can do. We've had a great time over some of our meetings with having all sorts of things happen. We started off when we first went to Zoom land with putting our own hats on, and then we realised that Zoom could do it for us. And so I've sort of started to explain about, I guess, my experience in terms of playfulness earlier, but I guess in terms of nursing as my primary discipline, it's been my experience that, being a nurse is a serious business, and in the tea room and outside of work, maybe catching up with a friend that you work with was the place to debrief and, let your hair down or be a bit more silly if you went out and, had a end of year work drinks or something like that. Whereas in the hospital, it was obviously very serious business all the time, and particularly in teaching nursing, both in clinical settings and then in higher education, it was a highly professional version of yourself that was expected and required. And even my experience with trying to integrate playful activities into the classroom had some negative I guess, feedback from some of the more senior people in my workplace. And then I guess the opposite of that, though, was that the students were really enjoying those activities and were able to feel really safe and socially connected once they got over that feeling of being a little bit silly. And other academics that were on board with giving it a go, once they felt confident with taking on these teaching approaches, they found them really rewarding, engaging, positive and fun. And the feedback we had from students was really up there in terms of their engagement and wanting to attend these classes. What about you, Judy?
Yeah, like I've had a similar experience. Actually, it's really interesting that you've drawn on, your experience in academic life as well. Prior to me joining the academic field, being a pediatric nurse, I was really shocked that many nurses actually didn't see play as they work in the pediatric ward, which I thought was quite interesting. I actually thought that many of the nurses thought that, our work was doing tasks or doing things for children and their families rather than being with and playing with as the language of the child. So that for me, there was still a negative view about being playful, that it was seen as wasting time or that you were being lazy or minimized in some way. So my PhD, which really focused on the integration of play, it really showed that play actually is quite a silenced discourse in nursing. And this led me to study play therapy in the UK. And since being now back in Australia and working as a play therapist, the play therapy team, of course, we're very playful in our academic roles. However, often we are criticised for being playful or being having too much fun, that there was a perception that we were not doing work if you're having fun. So I think it's interesting just to think about that, because play, is a language. We can communicate, and when we're feeling safe and playful, we're actually likely to explore so much more. In fact, and if you haven't done it already, one of the things that I do is I have on my LinkedIn account that play is a language, and I've put it on my LinkedIn account as a secondary language. Okay.
That's so good.
Well, I think we should start. That's one way to get prioritized.
I'll have to do that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so why did we choose this topic? We've already given you a little bit of an overview about this, but we really saw from a play therapy perspective this as an opportunity to marry the art and science of nursing through the lens of play. So nursing practice is clearly articulated in the literature as both a science and an art. So the science of nursing is described as evidence-based practice, which is in line with codes and conducts and ethical standards of practice. So despite an academic focus on clinical excellence being crucial, that balance with the art and science of nursing is something that's paramount in higher education curriculum. And the art of nursing is described as the core components of compassion, communication, and quality of care, as well as the biopsychosocial needs, spiritual needs, and cultural determinants of health of patients and families and communities. So nurses have articulated that the increasing complexity of medical tasks over time, and especially now in this world of COVID, have resulted in nurses having to prioritise clinical practice over relational care. And like Judy was saying before, an example of that is not having time for the playful interactions with paediatric patients. So these soft skills, which we describe them as, are often more difficult to teach in nursing curriculum. So nurses are viewed as being valued for demonstrating good, honest and moral behaviours, but it's something that is sometimes difficult to embed into education. So we need to focus on ways of being able to incorporate these values into the higher education courses such as nursing and play therapy for that matter, and probably some of the different disciplines that perhaps you come from too. So Judy and I've both had really successful outcomes teaching in playful ways as academics, and we find that once students overcome that fear of being viewed as silly and dive into the flow of play-based learning, their core learning objectives are consolidated really deeply and in a felt way. And these soft skills that we're hoping to develop that really start to show, and they become quite humanistic in their way of being. And so this ability for them to learn experientially through that felt experience while being in a safe, socially engaged state results in these core nursing skills being able to then automatically being translated into practice. So the art of being with another person comes more naturally to them, and that is really a core nursing construct. And we utilise the therapeutic powers of play, which we're going to explain in a little bit, and to be able to help with that playful learning. Okay.
So now we're going to, and thank you, Kimmy, for putting the Mentee code in the chat box as well. I'm just going to open up the next one. We just wanted to know a little bit of background as far as who, if you are a teacher or a professor, if the first question will be yes or no. And then we wanted a word cloud to find out the different occupations that are here, because whilst we're nurses and we're giving this from a nursing perspective, it'd be really nice to be able to hear what others, what other disciplines are here today. So now I might need I'm just going to share this.
Do you want me to stop sharing now?
That's all right. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll just share that one. Share. There we go. Look at all these teachers and professors. One that's not. Oh, we better answer too. Hang on. There we go. All right. So slightly more teachers, and then I'll just do this one as well. We'll present what is your occupation. So you can enter a word, and because Belinda and I are both nurses as well as play therapists, some of you may want to put more than one occupation in. Oh, lots of teachers. Oh, an entrepreneur, wonderful. An ethnographer. Okay. Oh, I love a mum.
I put that in there. I felt like I couldn't not say that too.
Yeah. A co-creator, curious, lovely. Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, I like workshopper as well.
Yeah, I could just be a shopper.
Yeah, that would be fun.
A poet. Oh, wonderful. A play designer, PhD student. Yeah, and I imagine just there's a few people here too are researchers, so that's wonderful. Awesome. Okay, I will stop share.
And I'll start share again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, that was really beautiful to see.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is just more of a discussion because we've spoken a little bit now. So I don't know how people feel about putting their mics on or writing in the comment box, but
yeah, right in the chat box.
Yeah. Just wondering what people think. We've spoken about some of the barriers that we've found to engage in play in higher education, but we'd be really interested to know what it looks like, or how things are different for you all over there on the other side of the world, and if it's really easy or if there's some barriers around how you need to be professional or the way that you present yourself, or if you can be really playful in higher education and bringing that into the curriculum too. Actually, I can't see the comments though, I've just realised.
Yeah, I've got it open so I can see them when they come through. But one of the things that, we're quite envious about, in Australia is the Scandinavian education system and also the British education system too. But one of the things, that we hear more and more about, particularly in Finland, that the education there, and teachers being very much prioritised and respected within the community. And I suspect that would be the same in other Scandinavian countries as well. Rike has just said, she thinks that having Too much fun can be a barrier. She's been accused for having too much fun at work, discussing philosophy as well as with staff in meetings, in a staff meeting, making the atmosphere too lighthearted. And I think that's actually what's happened to us as play therapists at Deakin University, where there's this perception that we mustn't be working very hard because we're always laughing or having fun, or we have tea parties, but because we are play therapists, we have these funny little tea parties. Yeah. Another one from Emily, is that how you pronounce it? Emily. I think there is a challenge in participating in play as a professional or a teacher. It's more expected to be a guide or facilitate play rather than participate in play. And Marie
that's a really
says,
good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Having too much fun can mean you do not know your role. And Sarah doesn't think students always realize that their learning as heaviness is removed from the learning. Yeah.
Oh, I love that way of describing it. The heaviness part of it too. Yeah.
Yeah. And involving students cross-professional settings. And I think that's actually really interesting too. Often if we are engaging in play, it changes the power dynamics and we become a little bit more equal. And if we've got this hierarchical system in place, it's interesting. The word play and playful can in itself be a barrier too. People envisage Legos, toys. Sorry, I just moved then. Something for children and something that they actually do, playfulness, without calling it play or playfulness. We're going to get to something a little bit more that sort of ties a little bit of that together as well. It's essential to create a dialogue between the topic and playfulness. Absolutely agree, Jacob. Yeah. Kimmy, understanding and value of play and fear of failing, getting out of one's comfort zone. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. People feel like they're out of control sometimes if they're being playful, maybe.
What is playful or fun for one person sometimes seems to be torture for somebody else. This is really important, Jenny. So thank you for this contribution here. She also goes on to say that managing different preferences and perceptions can be challenging and sometimes lead to playing it safe, i.e. not playing at all. So actually thinking and being consciously aware of those perceptions. And then Marie has, somebody else might need to read Marie's or translate that.
Come on, Judy.
Por certain entes qual viven de familias directive.
I'm actually seeing the chat as well now. I think it's got something to do with families, something you do at home with families, not something that you do at a serious place of study. How'd I go, Marie?
I
don't know.
It's in French. It's in French. Oh dear.
I think it says you're certain about something.
Sorry. We sort of lost the plot there. I think also thinking about the directiveness, whether it's facilitator directed or child directive, is important. Have we hit does anyone here speak French and English that can speak to that from Marie? I feel like I'm doing very badly.
I tried to translate it in Google Translate.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
For some students who come from very directive families, playing during their studies can reveal a lack of seriousness in their learning. That's absolutely spot on. Absolutely. And what we're finding here in Australia as well is that the seriousness and the outcomes, what the benchmark is for learning, particularly for children, is so high that, you know, play is getting scraped out of the curriculum, you know, or even playtime or lunchtime to fill it up with, you know, fill their brain with cognitive development at the cost of play, when we know actually the flip of that is one of you know, tricky. So Sarah also said, I think play and fun can enable new and divergent ways of thinking and being. This is actually exactly what we're talking about, which is therefore challenging norms. In academia, this is normally a positivist worldview, which focuses on producing. Absolutely. Play can be simply holding the space for divergence and disruption. This can challenge hierarchies and structures and aside, loving the relationship between the
Oh, thank you, Sarah.
Oh, so good. All right, so that's brilliant. So we'll go on to, I think then, thank you very much, everyone, for that.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, sorry, I'll just close the chat box so I can get to the next slide. And before I do, actually, I just wanted to say that this picture we picked, I thought it was quite interesting that this person didn't have a nose or a mouth or potentially eyes, you know, was the part of them hidden away if we're looking at a metaphorical meaning about not being able to be playful.
Yeah, so we've reduced the senses in every aspect.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
So this slide actually sums up what we've presented in our article, and of course Kimi has also put the link to that in the chat box earlier. So the integration of play-based educational approaches allows for an innovative discourse, and I'm assuming that most people know when I'm talking about discourse that we're talking about not only what is said, it's how it's said and how it's actioned, or in some cases not actioned in, you know, in the environment where we're, you know, looking at in this case, the phenomena of play. So what the discourses are allowed to emerge, whereby learning is experienced as a socially engaged state. We've used some examples in relation to this as the interactive simulations and the inclusion of role play to ensure culturally appropriate learning. I've certainly experienced that when I've, you know, worked and learnt about Indigenous Australian culture, where it's quite an immersive experience within that. What we find, Lawrence 2012 discusses that artistic expression transforms learning when the individual's imagination and creativity is activated. It is transformed. And this is what happens in the what Belinda was talking about in relation to nursing education. This is what we're talking about as the art and the science of nursing practice, which intersects here with andragogy and the integration of play and playfulness in nursing education. So I think something that we are also really cognizant of is where the learning is an embodied experience. It's a felt sense of experiencing and integrating those knowledges and skills as something different. That is the learning. Thanks, Belinda. Oh, my dog is actually trying to come in, come out, come in, come out. Sorry about that. I might just, while we would go on to this next one.
Yeah,
that's all right.
That's fine. So I just wanted to just give a little overview of what we mean by andragogy. So this is a theoretical and practical approach to adult learning, and it's really important when we're designing curriculum to ensure that we're considering learners understand the rationale for their learning, that learners engage experientially in a meaningful way, that learners are given the opportunities to problem solve, and that learning's scaffolded across the unit but also across the course, and that adult learners are considered central to their own learning, and that it's based on a humanistic stance as well. And so this approach is really important for when playful academics design learning activities, because we do understand that we're working with adult learners and they need to know the justification for their the learning of that specific content, and that they do learn experientially, and that, you know, they want to approach learning in a way of being able to solve a problem, and, you know, that they are able to be treated as an equal as well. So we think about andragogy in association with having that humanistic stance that's Carl Rogers, and positions the student at the centre of the learning process. And so he is the one that speaks about person-centred therapy, and so person-centred approaches in education, where the educated uses those humanistic skills, which are similar to what we use in play therapy, around unconditional positive regard, empathy and congruence, to facilitate the student's acquisition of knowledge, skills and reflexivity. So in terms of us being able to have a student-centred stance, to create those optimal learning conditions, the way that we incorporate play-based teaching is we have that unconditional positive regard for the people that we're working with. So we accept them as they are. We're authentic and genuine and caring. And, you know, in that way, we're teaching them to be that way for their patients. And then we're able to consider their personal growth as well, and, you know, that they've got their own internal resources to support them in their way of being and their ability to change. So the congruence is being able to display how we are feeling, obviously with discretion, but being genuine and real and transparent. And I think that comes across when there's that equalness in being able to be playful as well. So it brings down those barriers of traditional type lecturer and student. So the way that we utilise that we'll talk about in the following slides, but that's around some of those embodiment, projection, role, play development theories and the therapeutic powers of play. So we've just got another mentee here.
Yeah, so we want to think about, and actually Jenny's in the chat box actually said, and she thinks that the metaphor are hugely playful, and I agree. I try to make mine as extravagant as possible to consider it to be part of me in everyday playfulness. I love that, Jenny. I just thought that's brilliant, and we're going to get to that in a minute. And I think you can use that actually in this next definition. So I will actually open that one up. Present. So now we want to just write a single word. You can use many words if you like, but single words make it easier to read in relation to the word cloud. And I think that's there. And I'll just share screen. Just going to take over from you.
Oh, good work. Thank you.
Oh, I love that word, provocation, wonder, openness. Role model creating. I think we should have some French words in here as well.
Yeah, for sure. Any language you want, actually. A bit of Danish would be great too.
Yeah. And we could have some playfulness in trying to pronounce them.
Yeah, like my figuring out of that sentence earlier.
I think you did pretty well. I think you did.
Saying I don't know any French whatsoever. Oh, laissez-faire. That's awesome.
Laissez-faire. We understand that one.
Yeah. Risk. Oh, I like that too. Pushing traditional lines.
I love creative as well. I think. How's that going? Willing, joyful, social. Well, there's a great lifestyle. Imagination, unpredictable, positive emotions, deconstruction. Deconstruction, that's a great one. It's also deconstruction as well as construction, contribution, motivation, exploration.
I'm just trying to see if there's any words I don't know in here. Fortes.
How do you say that? Fortes? You're going to have to look at it. Or act forskenby. And if you can write play in your own language as well, we'd really like that. Except we may not be able to tell. Okay. Maybe in the chat box.
Oh, leg. I like leg. What does that mean?
And jus?
That's play. Like.
What's that, sorry?
Like is play.
Like.
Like.
Oh, leg. Yeah.
Oh, you pronounce it like. Correct. Anyway, I will stop share. That's wonderful. Thank you, everybody. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. Okay, I'll start sharing again.
Okay.
So the next slide's about defining play. I feel like everyone's got a pretty good understanding of that anyway, though. So I won't go into it in too much detail because I realise we're probably going to run out of time. But basically, we know now that neuroscience tells us that when we engage in play, we're growing thoughts and feelings about ourselves and our world. And people do find it a bit tricky to define play, so I think we did a wonderful job there. But, you know, it can be dissected into elements, characteristics, and according to function. So Eberg talks about anticipation, surprise, pleasure, understanding, strength, and poise. And some of the ways that we've sort of thought about describing it is things such as, oh, hold on, I've lost my little list that we had. So characteristics such as being fun, spontaneous, episodic, voluntary, active, symbolic, meaningful, rule governed, or has no extrinsic goal. So I'll just go to the next slide because this was something that we were talking about a little bit earlier and Judy was just going to go into.
Yeah, absolutely. So this actually came on Facebook just the other day, and I just think this is really quite horrifying as well, where in 1982 pretend play accounted for 41% of preschoolers' playtime, and in 2002 it's dropped to only 9%. I think that's a little bit frightening, and I think when we're looking at what Belinda has just presented, that actually in that previous slide you were saying that, I've just lost my train of thought there, that one of the precursors for literacy and cognitive development is actually all of this pretend play and self-initiating play. And we know the work of Karen Stegniti and Louise Pash here in Australia have been really pushing towards play in education as well. So just think that's really interesting that we need to probably, you know, increase that. And what would that be now, you know, another 20 years later? So
Yeah, that's right. And this is taken from an American website, so it might be different throughout Scandinavia or Europe or the UK or anywhere else in the world. But I know in Australia it's definitely declining, and there's a lot of us that are really trying to get that play-based education happening again, all the way from kinder right through.
All the way, absolutely. And I think the next slide actually helps us thinking about that a little bit more when we're talking about the therapeutic powers of play. So the therapeutic powers of play are expressed in this graphic, and we're going to show you a little YouTube clip. But this was coined by the late emeritus Professor Charles Schaefer, who looked at the therapeutic powers of play. And the more of these therapeutic powers of play, which are the change agents that we use in play therapy, the more of these that are activated, the greater the therapeutic effect. And we can also use this for and adapt this to learning and teaching as well. So we'll go to the next slide, and it's just a little 3-minute YouTube clip. And we just want to share with you, just to remember the sound.
Yep, I'll double check that's sharing, sorry. Yep, that should be sharing.
Cool.
Sound.
Thanks.
Okay. I'll just go to the next one. Oops,
Thanks.
sorry.
Let's just play it again. Oh, it's so good. The music gets a bit much after a while. So what we wanted to connect here is the Association for Play Therapy in the US defined play therapy as a systematic use of the theoretical model to establish an interpersonal process wherein the trained play therapist uses the therapeutic powers of play to help clients prevent or resolve psychological difficulties and achieve optimal growth and development. What I wanted to just say here, it's interesting to note that in the previous slide where we're talking about the decline of pretend play in 1982, where it was 41%, the Association for Play Therapy was also established in 1982 to perhaps, counter some of these issues in relation to children and the need for mental health for children in a language that is appropriate for children as well. Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Are you right if we keep going to the
yeah,
next
I
one?
think I was just going to say too that just because Belinda and I are both nurses and play therapists, there are so many different models of play therapy. We talked a little bit about humanistic, which is one of the models. Others are we actually teach teachers how to, basically para play therapists as well, how to work with children in schools as well. And also, so that's sort of like another sort of dimension to what we are doing here in Australia. But there's also humanistic, systemic, emerging, learn to play for children who have poor play skills. And this is emerging because children are not developing, pretend play skills as much as what perhaps they did in previous decades. And particularly for, as Belinda mentioned earlier, in relation to children on the autism spectrum.
Yeah,
I think I'll just leave it there because I could talk about that all night.
Oh no, we could keep going. I realise I keep looking at the time, going, "Oh, we've got a little bit to go still, but we're nearly there." But yeah, I could talk about that as well in terms of kids that are neurodiverse, and these opportunities for them to be able to play or learn to play, and then go on with and having better futures because of that. So, in terms of the other model that we've mentioned is embodiment, projective, and role play. And so this was developed by Jennings in 1999, so a little while ago now. And we utilise this model because it's around developmental play, and it's helping us to understand, I guess, what happens for a child over time as their personality develops. So starting to first understand themselves and the way that they're being in the world. And then we see that through their embodiment play, and Judy's going to explain that a little bit more in the next slide. And then they start being able to view themselves within the world around projective play, and then role play is more them then interacting with their world and being able to take on the role of other people as well. So that's the way that we think about it in terms of developmental play therapy. But then obviously when we adapt that to teaching with adults, we can think about bringing it back to basics for them and helping them to develop a personal identity, but then a professional identity as a nurse or whatever else they're studying. So that we can apply it to practice for them then through these experiential type activities that we're going to be practicing in a minute, actually. So I'll pop it to the next slide and you can talk a little bit more about that if you needed to, Judy.
Thanks, Belinda. Yeah, this is a slide that I developed with my colleague Kate Renshaw and Trav Zimmer, who is a graphic artist. So we've been using this, and this is a graphic that, I think Rike and Kimmy, you already have this slide that can go out to participants as well for today. But what's really interesting is when we're thinking about the age and stage of development, as you can see from conception right through to young people and the lower section of this graphic. In the middle, you can obviously see, and many of you will know about Erik Erikson's stages, psychosocial stages of development. We've aligned those. Then we've looked at the brain development, the neuroscience. Yeah, thanks, Pointer. So then from conception through to young people as well. But we've got these critical periods of development in the brackets underneath those brain structures is the critical areas of development. So if a child, for example, when they come to play therapy, if a child has actually had an incident, for example, when they were, say, 2 years old, we can go back to that embodied sensory play development and work on that and look at some of the neural, as we know with neuroplasticity, we can go back and work on some of those earlier structures of critical development before we move on to the next one. And so that's why in play therapy, we can, so if a child's being able to think about, I think, you know, in education, if they're not learning at their level, it's not a bad idea to go back and look at their history to see if we can actually do some lower. I mean, this is what Vygotsky called about, you know, like in relation to scaffolding up, but we can also scaffold downwards as well, so that we can actually try and target where something is specific for that child. I think there we've got also the embodiment, projective and role play. So in the pink sections there in the middle. So the embodiment, also Erikson talked about the autosphere, the microsphere, which is the small world, and then the macrosphere, which is using the whole space more in role play. And I suspect that's where Sue Jennings, you know, in her early work may have thought about that. And I think also, as many of you are teachers, thinking about attachment play, often in the early childhood sector, we really need to think about, you know, some of those teachers being attachment figures for children as they come through the school environment. The other thing that I would like just to draw your attention to is, again, I'm sort of working on some understanding of the psychosocial, Erikson's psychosocial development. And of course, every time we meet somebody new, we go back to the beginning, like, can I trust this person? What's our blueprint there? And we go through that whole scale again. So we do that in play therapy as well. And also as a student coming through the system as well. So I think that's a fairly useful slide. I hope that's useful for you, and feel free to use that.
Yeah. I know I use it all the time. Thank you, Judy. So, so now we're getting up to the really fun bit. So I just wanted to check in, Rike, do we have enough time to do these? I know we wanted to allow for question time at the end. We've already gone a little bit over an hour.
Yeah. Well, the event is closing in 25 minutes.
Yeah,
okay.
Great. So we should have time to do these, I think, because those are just 2 different activities, and then there'll be time for questions as well. So, okay, so if everyone is able to, if you could get just actually we need the piece of paper for the next one, don't we? So we'll do this one, and and then we can do that for the next one. Okay, so for this one, we're really just asking people to do what we would call an embodiment type activity. So looking at interoception, so what's happening on the inside. And we just want to ask you to, and if you want to, you can turn your camera off, like stop your video, and just tune into how your body is feeling. So people might have done some sort of progressive muscle relaxation before, or a mindfulness activity. We're not quite going to do it exactly like that, but it's really just a moment to consider any part of your body that feels tense, or if you've got any pain, And the idea would be just to scan well, as slowly or as quickly as you'd like to, from the top of your head all the way down through your body, focusing even on your internal organs and considering what body sensations are happening for you. And so if people are just having a moment to do that, I recognise that it's probably the start of the day for a lot of you. And so potentially your body might be feeling super fresh, or maybe you've just gone for a run or a walk or done a personal training session or something like that, and maybe you're feeling a little bit sore. Maybe you're already sore from sitting at the computer at this early hour of the day. And maybe us that it's the end of the day, we're starting to feel a bit of stiff and sore as well, and what that might mean. So it's giving you the opportunity to just focus on what's happening on the inside. So I'm going to just be quiet for a minute to let you think about that. And you feel free to close your eyes if you want to as well. And then the next thing that is going to be an extra challenge for you, and you might even feel a little bit silly, because we did promise silliness, I'm pretty sure, didn't we? Is to give your body a shake. So and then just feel how that feels. So just really, you can't see my arms because of the way that the screen's set up, but giving yourself a movement and a wiggle and a shake, and someone's moving their head, that feels pretty amazing. And just seeing what happens in your body when you're doing that. A little wiggle and a jiggle. And then some of the other things that we tend to do are things like box breath work. So when we think about that, it's about doing breathing. There's all different types of ones, but this one would be focusing on your breath, going, around in a box like 4, 4, 4, 4 potentially. And just really focusing on breathing. And sometimes you can even just doing that with a class, especially now we've had to do a lot of things online, can just ground everyone and bring them back into the classroom, so to speak. And then I guess some of the other things would just be to think about, how do you describe how you're feeling in your body? So trying to get people to think about, and not necessarily even share, but if you were describing what's happening in your mind at the moment, what's the colors that might be happening inside your brain, and what shapes can you feel or see in there, what noises are happening inside your brain or your mind. Are there cogs turning, for example? Is there any rhythm that comes to mind when you're thinking about that? And then how does that compare to if you were describing what was happening in your abdomen or your stomach? Are you feeling hungry or satisfied, or what different colors or shapes or sounds or movements come to mind for you? So you could do that about any part of your body really, or describing your limbs, or focusing on just your left foot and how does that feel? Is there what temperature is it, or what color or shape might you be considering around that, and what symbols come to mind? So these things, some people are like, oh yeah, that's easy, that's no worries, I'm used to doing that, I do meditation every day. But some other people might find that a little bit difficult to even imagine. And we've had students before that have said that they find it quite difficult to get into even that type of imaginary thinking or imaginary play, because you do need to, I guess, have a little bit of a playful hat on when you're thinking about these things. And sometimes, like people were saying earlier, if they've come from a really serious background and that, you know, learning has to be all about A plus B equals C, then they wouldn't understand the point of doing this. And so I think someone else was saying it's about adding context and being able to link it back to why we're doing this or why it's important. So Judy even did this with me this morning without me realizing, when I was feeling a bit dysregulated, and we had a bit of a debrief, and then and I think I can't even remember what you said now, but something like, okay, feel back into your body and have a big deep breath or something. I can't remember, do you? That seems like a long time ago now.
Yeah, no, that was good. We actually had a card reading as well. So
oh yeah, we did too. We got really
but it
out
was
there.
actually yeah, just to refocus and reframe and all of that. So I think it's actually really useful. You know, sometimes we just forget to stop and listen to our bodies. Yeah, I think this is a really good exercise. Thanks. Did we want to reflect on, does anyone want to reflect on that at all? I'll just keep going.
Yeah, I've just got the slide here in case anyone wanted to add any comments about everything I was just saying there, even your experiences of it. We didn't dive deep into each of those different types of experientials, but yeah, I guess, you know, when I spoke about that first one and being able to feel into your body, if there was anything that was unexpected for you, you could even let us know about, or was there sensations that came up? Like I often find when I'm doing that, I'm like, oh yeah, my shoulders are really sore, or my arms are actually quite sore, and I forgot about that because, you know, I was working my body so hard without actually paying attention to it. So, and then sometimes you have little drop-ins too about things like, oh, I'm just going to stop working for a second and focus on a minute of being, you know, within myself, and then the answer might come around what you're going to be doing within the project or the research anyway. So you see it in a fresh perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Just sharing, on the weekend, I did a forest therapy walk, and it was just amazing to connect with nature as well. I find that's actually quite inspirational, and I imagine many other people here would as well. Having said that, one of the presenters in that walk, in the therapy walk, was actually saying that the reason, you know, why the Japanese, what they called, I can't pronounce the word, but it means forest bathing, but forest therapy, was to counter the increasing suicide rates and also the decrease in forestation. So bringing those two together actually made a lot of sense. So I didn't know that before then, but it certainly got me into my body, and how slow I felt afterwards. When we're always often in our heads as academics, we tend to, you know, need something to take us away from that. And that's actually quite useful. I think I just want to go back to one of the things that that Christian has actually put in the chat box, and I suspect that is actually in relation to the YouTube clip. Is that right, Christian? That this is not another stealing of play to use for something else, like playful, yeah. But play is not useful in their understanding. So what I wanted to respond to that is that in the relation to the development of that was to do with actually play as play therapy. That play is the medium, and it is the mode, and it is the way of doing therapy. And these are some of the identified therapeutic powers of being able to, that play actually helps change and facilitate therapeutic healing. Does that make sense? So does that make sense in the conjunction with that video. I think that was probably important just to clarify.
Mm. All right, I'm just catching up on the chat box there as well. So let's have a look with the next one.
Yeah.
So this is our last little activity.
So yes, as we said before, we were talking about, so there's that embodied play. We've talked about that interoception. When we're talking about projective, sometimes, you know, I use a lot of puppets in my work. As you know, children will be able to project onto puppets. We might use miniatures in a sand tray, for example. We can also project by picking up anything, using it as object substitution. So a pen can become a phone, whatever. Again, that's actually, you know, I have a stone here, and I can see a lion's face in that. I'm not sure whether you can see that. That was something that we talked about today, but I find that quite nice and grounding. So the fact that I can see a lion's face, I'm projecting onto that, that stone an image that I see. What I'd like you to do now is just to draw on anything. So we've talked about your playful self. We've talked about play, and we haven't probably differentiated those enough, I think, probably in response to Christian there in relation to play and playfulness. But I think it's really important to think about this in the context of, you know, whichever way you want to view it. Can be either. It can be your professional self or your personal self, having a piece of paper, popping something, and I'm going to use this stone here in the center of the page, and then draw from that, thinking about different either colors or images or thoughts or feelings. Perhaps you might want to think about how you might create safety in the work that you currently do with your student cohorts. It could be about something that you can take from this today that you may want to integrate into your teaching or into your research.
And it can be quite abstract as well.
Be anything. Just one more minute. And then if I can just ask you just to write down 3 words, write down 1 word, 3 words if you like, to describe what you've created, the image you've created. Here we go. Thanks, Marie. Web. Taking the time to feel alive.
Ah.
Oh, constellation
Oh, I
of
love
the
that everyone's
stars.
writing in there.
Yeah, thank you. Connected collection.
Oh, we did it at the same time, Kimmy.
Thank you. So I think we'll just go then if there's any questions.
Yeah.
Pathways network emerging. Beautiful.